So especially knowing that we don't have any folks with non-NF2 schwannomatosis here, I'm happy to spend more time on these slides about the NF2 studies and answer questions. I also know a lot of the studies I'm going to talk about, some of you guys are actually participating in, so if you don't mind, I might call on some of you who I know are involved, because I'd love to hear from your perspectives, kind of how it has been to be a participant, to talk to folks. But yes, please stop me at any time. A little bit more background on me than what I said in the main session is I'm a researcher at Massachusetts General Hospital at the NF clinic there. I work with Scott Plotkin and Justin Jordan, who some of you might know if you are involved in some of the clinical trials for NF2. I am a researcher there, so I've been working there for 14 years for the most part. I did 2 years away during my training, but otherwise have been at the NF clinic since I graduated college. So I've gotten to know a lot of people with NF, and one of my dear friends has NF2 related schwannomatosis herself, Edith. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk to you and share some of these trials that are going on and other research. And like I said, stop me at any point. I'm happy to take questions in the middle. So the first topic we wanted to talk about, we were kind of going on the theme.
Wait 1 second, I'm going to make the background a little darker so it's easier to read.
Oh, sure. Is that easier to read for folks? Oh, no, just the captioning.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the first trial I wanted to talk about is called the Intuit NF2 trial. I know we have at least one person who is involved in the trial. This is the ongoing trial. It is a multi-center trial. It's led by Dr. Plotkin at Mass General, but it also, I think I hopefully have a slide of the different sites, involves a lot of folks. And this is, well, I'll just get into it. But this is the newest kind of and biggest trial for NF2, trying new kinds of medication to treat NF2-related tumors. And this trial is an adaptive platform basket trial. I have 3 pieces of jargon, but I'll explain what all of those 3 pieces mean. And even the whole reason I talk about the jargon is because each of those words is kind of a cool new design for NF2 that we hadn't tried before this trial, all in the service of trying to make drug development quicker for NF2. The rationale of this study is that we want to really try to rapidly and efficiently screen whether drugs are working. So the standard model for clinical trials in NF2 prior to this study was that we would pick one agent, one new drug, and we would test it for one thing. So for example, the studies of bevacizumab, which is the brand name is Avastin, we would enroll people who had vestibular schwannomas, and we saw if Avastin worked for that. One tumor, one drug, and it took many years and actually multiple trials to finally figure out what the right dose was and the fact that that was effective for some people in slowing down tumor growth and restoring their hearing. But that's kind of a little bit slow when we think about what we need for NF2. People have different kinds of tumors. They have the acoustic neuromas often, but also schwannomas, meningiomas, ependymomas in other parts of their brain and spine and body. So wouldn't it be great if we looked at all of those at exactly the same time? So that's what we're trying to do with this drug, is instead of one tumor at a time, we look at the effect across all of the tumors we think might be effective. And this is really kind of a first pass screening study to get a sense of what drugs might be working and then enable confirmatory studies down the line. So if people want to get FDA registration, that we've kind of, like Sarah talked about, de-risked this for pharmaceutical companies, because we've done the legwork to say, we already have looked across all of these different tumor types. This is the one we think that works. So these are the 2 that it's working in. You can go forward and try to pursue getting FDA approval for that, and have a really high likelihood that it's going to work because we've kind of done the legwork. And so this is what the design looks like. Oh, good. I'm glad I have the picture. Here on the right are the 6 sites that are involved in this trial if you were going to sign up. Mass General, New York University, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, the University of Miami, Mayo Clinic being the closest to here, and then also UCLA out on the West Coast. So we're not doing the best job yet of making this accessible to everyone in the US, but at least a couple of sites, different options to go to. And then, does this work? No, the pointer doesn't work, so I'll just point with my hand if I need to, I guess. The way that this is designed, so first I'll talk about what is a platform trial. A platform trial means that we are going to try different kinds of drugs. So like I said, the old model used to be one trial, one drug at a time. But this is a way in which we enroll people who have similar criteria, so similar eligibility to enroll. In this case, it's anyone who has at least one growing tumor, so one tumor that we've already seen on MRIs growing quickly. And then we can enroll them in different drugs that we're going to be testing. And in fact, we can add more drugs over time. So right now we have brigatinib, which we've already tested, and we're testing right now neratinib, but we can add more in the future. And you don't have to sign up for a whole new study, and we as researchers don't have to stand up a whole new study. So hopefully that makes it partially more efficient. And we actually even have, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, people, if brigatinib didn't work for you, you could sign up for neratinib. But if it is working, you can stay on it. So this also makes it more efficient for patients rather than this didn't work, now you have to go find a new trial somewhere else. You can roll over into the next arm. So that's what we mean when we say platform trial, is that there's more drugs and more can be added in the future. And then basket trial means we're not just looking at one tumor. So instead of the old studies where for the most part they were vestibular schwannoma studies, if you have a growing tumor of any of these types, you're eligible to enroll. And we call whichever one was growing the fastest your target tumor, and then we'll look at your other tumors as well. So trying to gather as much data as possible rather than just focus on the one that's growing. We'll monitor actually up to 5 others and see how those are going as well.
Can I ask a quick question? And I don't know if
Yes,
this is the right place
interrupt.
to ask, but
No.
can we take a step back and we just look at clinical trials in general?
Yeah.
Right? So we're looking at these list of locations.
Yes.
None of which are in this area, right? Like,
Yeah.
how, like, where does that start? Like, where does, like, obviously does it start that those are the research areas that are studying it and then the doctors become involved? Like, I guess I'm confused on where it...
Oh, like how do we decide where we're going to
Yeah.
open a trial? Yeah, so as an academic kind of trial, so not with a pharmaceutical company backing us significantly, they do provide us the drug, but otherwise don't give us funding. A lot of this funding comes from the Children's Tumor Foundation and other places. It's really who has the manpower to volunteer and like stand this up. So it is kind of who has a site that has a lot of NF2 patients and doctors who are interested in NF2 who volunteer to be part of it. And so these are some of the major NF2 researchers work here is how this ended up. We're certainly interested in adding extra sites if there are doctors who are really interested in doing that, but that's partially the problem is that this is a little bit bare bones funding wise. So sometimes people's hospitals, the doctor is great and wants to open it, but their hospital says it's not really enough money for us to go through the legal work of opening this. There's ethical oversight and monitoring. The nurses who are going to watch you when you come in, if you're getting infusions, that nurse. So it's kind of a volunteer-ish basis of who would like to participate and has the resources to do so. So it is these major academic medical centers that have a lot of that framework behind them to be able to run trials. But we have been talking about adding more and are interested, so I would say it could change in the future. We could add more sites, but this is where, it started with. And then another consideration is, do you have a lot of patients that would come to you who would be willing to be followed there, which is sometimes easier in the existing sites that have the biggest clinics, because then there's lots of people getting their care there anyway who are used to traveling to that site. Yeah. So that's how those 6 came together. Any other questions at this phase? So right now, Intuit is the whole trial as a whole, and then we'll talk about these drug sub-studies. So specific people who are assigned to get brigatinib or neratinib. And I'll start with brigatinib because that's the one that we recently finished and have results for. So within each of those drug substudies or drug arms, we follow what's called an adaptive design. So this is the last third word of the jargon of trial design. What does it mean to be an adaptive trial? So normally in a clinical trial, we have a target of people we want to enroll. We enroll all of them, and at the end we look at the results. You say we're going to sign up 20 people, you sign up your 20 people, you follow it, and then you say 2 of the 20 people had a response, or 10 of the 20 people. But that can sometimes waste resources, because what if you have one of those drugs that's only 1 of 20 people? You kind of wish you knew that earlier, and maybe you cut your losses and went to a new drug. So that's what adaptive trials are meant to design. So in this, even though we overall think we would like to see 40 people, we enroll 20 people first. And then we say, what's happening in those 20 people? And we do an interim, it's called an interim analysis. We actually pause, we stop, and we say, what's happening in these 20 people? Is there any tumors that are responding? And so if nothing happens in those 20 people, we say, this drug isn't gonna work, we're gonna cut our losses here, we're stopping early, and we terminate. But if there's at least one person that's showing a benefit, we look at the results and we say, okay, what are the most promising indications so far? Which tumors seem like they're responding the best? Let's enroll 20 more people that have those kinds of tumors, and that way we get the most evidence for what's most likely to work. So we're trying to also help for people, get the people who are most likely to benefit on the trial, while also hoping to get evidence that says, here we're getting this response and we're enrolling in what's working. So that's what happens here. And just a little bit about brigatinib. Brigatinib is an ALK inhibitor. You'll often hear people say these with drugs, right? An inhibitor or a blocker just means what pathway is it targeting. It was already FDA approved to treat some types of lung cancer. So it's already a drug that we had some experience with in oncology patients in terms of knowing like what were the side effects in those patients, how did it work? And we said, hey, that same pathway that's active in some of these lung cancers might also be active in NF2. Can we also try that drug? And so this is an oral pill, you take it once a day. And we knew it had pretty mild side effects in the cancer patients, which made us feel better about trying it out for folks with NF2, because we said, you know, it's not no side effects, some diarrhea, sometimes cramping, but it wasn't anything that was like, we can't give this to, you know, human beings that it got stopped. So a lot of the drug treatments we do for NF2 are these drugs that have been FDA approved for some other issue, and we're repurposing them because we say, hey, we actually think that pathway might matter here as well. And so I wanted to show you this is what we actually looked at when we were in the committee here at the interim analysis. We enrolled 20 people, and we followed them all for at least 6 months. And then we said, what happened to their tumors? And we looked at 2 different factors. So I keep trying to pointer and it's not working. I wonder, do you see this? Oh yeah, okay. So we looked at 2 factors. The first thing, so these are tumor growth. 0% would mean your tumor didn't change at all. A positive number would mean it grew, and then a negative number means it's shrinking in volume. So the first thing we looked at was these N's. So this is how many people had each of these tumors, and what we call the radiographic response. So how many shrunk at least 20%. And you can see here, the biggest numbers that happened were non-vestibular schwannomas. 26% of them shrunk by that pre-specified threshold. So this is schwannomas anywhere else in your body besides your hearing nerve. So it could be a cranial nerve, could be in your body. And then also meningiomas. 5 of the 19 meningiomas shrank by that much. You can see we didn't have as much of a response in vestibular schwannomas, only 1. And none in the 2 ependymomas, which unfortunately we only had 2 people who enrolled who had an ependymoma, so it's a little hard to tell. But we also looked at a second piece of data. That was the primary outcome. But we said, you know, we're still also interested in knowing what's happening to the growth rate before we know everyone had a growing tumor. That was the inclusion to enroll, and then what happens after. So this is pre-treatment in blue, and then post-treatment in red. So So you can see the best responses here are still in those same two categories. The non-vestibular schwannomas were growing roughly, let's say that's on average 18%, and now you can see they're shrinking. Same thing with the meningiomas. They were growing really fast before treatment, and while on the trial had slowed down significantly. We see some effect. It's obviously not as great in vestibular schwannomas, where maybe they're growing more slowly than they used to be, but are still growing. And here with the ependymomas, we see basically no change at all. And so this is exactly the data we were looking at this interim analysis, and we said, well, this seems like an easy call. Obviously, some people are having shrinkage. We're going to move forward with stage 2. We're going to enroll 20 more people, and we're going to enroll people who have either growing meningiomas or non-vestibular schwannomas, because that's where it seems like we're working the best. And then we enrolled the 20 other patients. Any questions about this or what these graphs mean? I know we show a lot of like plots and figures, but any questions about this? Okay. So then we enrolled the 20 more people. We also followed all of them for at least 6 months, and the people who were, the first 20 were also still getting treatment. And we followed everyone time. This was just published earlier this year in the New England Journal, so I'll just summarize some of the findings. It's public if you want to see. Overall, we have these 40 people who are between the ages of 12 and 54. They had had a lot of treatment previously, so 90% had already had surgery to remove a tumor, 55% had tried some other kind of chemotherapy that either didn't work or they had to stop due to side effects, and 20% had tried radiation. So people who have obviously had a lot of issues before. And we studied the effect of brigatinib on 173 of their tumors. So as I said, we followed people multiple of their tumors, depending on how many they had, to see is brigatinib having an effect. And just about the results, so we found that overall 10% of the target tumors shrank, so the target being that one we picked as the primary tumor of interest that was growing really fast. But 23% actually of all tumors, and this differed based on the tumor type. So we saw more often responses in the meningiomas and non-vestibular schwannomas. We saw this trend where the annual growth rate slowed down, right? It was going super fast ahead, and we could slow it down, but not necessarily stop it completely. And for people who did have hearing still, about a third of those ears actually improved in hearing. It's kind of weird to say that, because why is the analysis ears and not people? But hearing loss is actually independent on both sides. So we looked at each of your ears. If it was hearing at baseline, did it get better? And about a third of them did. And we also saw a decrease in pain. So we asked patients to fill out these patient-reported questionnaires, and on the pain question in specific, we saw some benefits during treatment. So all in all, I think this was exciting. It was better than we had seen in a lot. It was very efficient. In 2 years, we could get a lot of data about how this chemotherapy works across multiple conditions. But obviously, it's not going to work for everyone. 23% is better than 0, but it's not 100%, which is why we're going to keep moving forward with other agents. And that's why we're studying, well, I should pause. Any questions about brigatinib before we move on that people want to know?
So what would be the net, like you said, 23% is better than 0.
Yeah.
So a new person is diagnosed with NF2, they can't get brigatinib right now from a provider, right?
You actually can get brigatinib from a provider because it's FDA approved for another indication. You can get off-label prescription.
I got it.
That doesn't mean your insurance has to cover it, but you can usually write an appeal based and your doctor should attach this paper. So for the most part, we've been successful in getting people access to the drug who want to try it. But yes, they can prescribe it for that specific reason, because it's already FDA approved for someone else. You can get it off label.
Cool.
So this is an option right now for anyone who would like to try it. I know several people who are getting it off label now.
I'm sorry to cover this.
Yeah, it was a little bit tardy.
Remind me, I think, at least for the trial, you were precluded if you were on another agent.
Yes.
Would that continue? Like if he's on everolimus and bevacizumab currently? Okay.
Yeah, so because we want to know what's the effect of specifically brigatinib, you couldn't be on it if you were currently on another medication. People have been on it and stopped. So that is actually something we're interested in exploring next, is could you combine brigatinib and bevacizumab together, and would that lead to a stronger response? But that would be down the line for the future study. So we are actively exploring, could that be one of the next arms to see if putting two together has an even better impact, especially because we know bevacizumab has done traditionally better for the vestibular schwannomas. Brigatinib was doing better for the meningiomas and non-vestibular. So what if we tag team together? Could we control more of the tumors all at once? So that's definitely something we can try in a future study. But yes, wasn't the case for any of these people. They were just on brigatinib. Yeah.
Sorry, that just, her question sparked another. What, I know you're about to talk about neratinib.
Yeah.
Since they're both in the same basket, could you, if you're on a neratinib trial, let's say, could you also be prescribed brigatinib and not be kicked off of the neratinib trial?
Not while you're on the trial. So it's good that we can evaluate more drugs under the same framework, but still only one at a time, unless we're specifically studying the combination. Because first we want to know, does neratinib on its own have any effect before we start mixing and matching? Yeah.
Awesome.
So good
Thank
question.
Andrew,
Yes. Susan.
So if this last article, since that was published, has there been any data for post 6 months on brigatinib yet collected that you?
Yes, so I should say the minimum length, like the newest, we were enrolling people over 2 years, so the shortest length person was on it for 6 months, but some of these folks were on it for I think our longest patient is up to like 3 years roughly now. So yeah, about half of the people on this are still currently receiving it. So we're still following them with MRIs and hearing tests, and then that would be our one of the next things to look at is the long-term efficacy. How durable is this response? But I can tell you a number of people are still on it, 2-3 years in.
Thank you.
Yeah, Natalie.
So if you're given two medicines at the same time to see what the efficacy is, do you get significantly reduced amounts so that you don't start having problems with, like, say, your blood work or your kidneys or your heart or something else because you're taking too much medication?
Yeah, so that's something we think about when we're combining the drugs, and this actually goes back to sometimes we do the phase 1-2 trial that Miriam talked about for that reason. We know a safe dose of one medication and we know a safe dose of the other one alone, but we're worried, what about if you combine them, especially if there's overlapping side effects? So that's exactly what's happening now in the NF1 world. They're trying to combine selumetinib, the approved drug, with cabozantinib, and they need to figure out the dose. Sometimes we can get away with not having to do a whole trial for that and just working it on our own. It's a little bit safer if they're non-overlapping the toxicity. We're a little less worried. So if the bevacizumab, we know, for example, we're worried about your kidney function, high blood pressure, that system. Neither of those things seems to be affected by brigatinib. They have other side effects like the diarrhea and that, but that makes us feel a little bit more confident if we put them together. It's not going to be so bad. It's not making like two things making one thing worse, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I do think that's one of the biggest things that we have to think about moving forward. I do know there are already people who are off-label trying brigatinib and bevacizumab, so we would try to learn from their experience to pick the clinical trial dose. But yeah, sometimes we do start with a little bit less of a dose of both of them, check that it's safe, so that also might be something we do. It's called like a run-in period, where maybe the first 3 people who enroll, we give them a little less, we see how it happens. If they seem okay, they're not having bad side effects, we can titrate up.
So my second question, as part B of this question is, what if you've never tried either of the drugs before? Would you have somebody try like one first and then drop in the second drug if they've never done either of the medications before to see how they react? Because if you give somebody 2 new drugs at the same time, wouldn't there be more chance of not knowing what's causing their problem? Or
if they're having a side effect?
Yeah.
I think that's a good question. I mean, that's a complicated, I guess, clinical decision if you haven't tried any of these. And I think to even larger question, given that bevacizumab we pretty much have accepted, even though it's not FDA approved, we pretty much accepted it works. Why would you sign up for a clinical trial of something new if you haven't tried that one? It could be, so I think it's a lot of an individual risk-benefit analysis with your doctor about which tumor type you have, how confident we think it's going to be to respond, what side effects matter to you or you might be more at risk for. And I mean, also maybe it comes down to convenience. Bevacizumab is an infusion. You have to take it every 2 to 3 weeks and go to the hospital. Brigatinib is an oral pill that you can take. If you're a kid in college, that could be a huge difference. So I think it's individualized decision making about whether to start with 2, try 1. But I think for a lot of people, you might feel like, I want to start with the whole kit and caboodle. I want to try both at once. If there's a problem, we'll try to assign which one we think it would be related to, especially because I said they're not really overlapping toxicities. Yeah. So we would probably think, oh, your blood pressure is high. That's probably the bevacizumab. Let's pull that one back first. So there are ways we could try, to figure it out. And then you could always go back. If it turns out that didn't help, switch it.
Yeah, that's true.
Probably that would be off the trial then, because at least what we're thinking of for next steps of the trial would be 2 together. And if you couldn't tolerate that, you might go back to
just
being
one step
off-label.
of it. Yeah, or off-label. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I have a question off of that. So there's clinical trial and then there's off-label.
Yes.
So my daughter's on Avastin now, or the other name. But she has both the hearing as well as she has mengenomas that are growing. So part of me is well, both would work, right? But I guess my question is how do you in a clinical trial get the results for doctors that are prescribing off-label? Would that be valuable knowledge to have if it's not part, you know what I'm saying? If you
to get the data that's not part of the study
Yes.
and try to inform it. Yes, that is a good point. We try to, so that's actually how we even figured out about bevacizumab to begin with. Before there was a trial, we were giving it off-label at MGH, and we did just a chart review of all these people we tried off-label. And that was the first paper that said, this actually really works. It's worth putting into a bigger trial. And so I think that's a good research question where we want to try to monitor that. And if you are seen in one of these clinics, I'm sure the PIs are also the people who lead the NF clinics. And so we're monitoring in that kind of unofficial way, but there's people who are going to other hospitals, right? And we don't know. And so it's, I think, a gap, unfortunately. We try to keep up word of mouth with doctors. How are things going at tumor boards? Check in. What are the responses people are seeing? What doses are happening? But unfortunately, there's not a great registry or public way to document what are people doing off-label. Sometimes in more common drugs, you'll do that by looking at insurance claims data or medical records, but often there's not that many NF2 patients at any one place, so you can pull the records from one hospital and get one person, but manpower-wise. So I think that is a gap that we try to manage informally by talking amongst each other and seeing, what are your patients off-label doing, what's happening, but is a little bit of a gap, unfortunately. Just a little frustrating. Did one other person have a question?
About the number of tumors? Is that just because you're only focusing on those 4 types? Because it doesn't seem like that many tumors for 40 people to be enrolled.
Yeah, so it was up to 5 tumors per person. Yeah, so some people only had 2 or 3 tumors because these are also people who've had surgery in the past. So maybe they already have had one of their vestibular schwannomas removed, so that wasn't counted, that kind of thing. And for people who had more than 5 tumors, just because of the bandwidth of doing, like we said, the MRIs and the volumes and keeping track of all the things, we only did up to 5 per person. Yeah.
So you would exclude people with more, or you just...
We didn't exclude them, we just didn't measure them for this analysis. Yeah, exactly. So you could have as many tumors and you're still eligible. We just only measured up to 5. Usually whatever 5, up to the 5 we thought were the most either symptomatic or growing the fastest, the ones that seemed most in need of treatment. Yeah. Okay. And so now it's exciting. So we have the brigatinib, and like we said, we'll continue to follow people long-term who are getting brigatinib to get a sense of how durable that effect is. But we're already on to the next drug, and we're looking for new drugs. So this has the exact same adaptive design where we're going to enroll 20 people, and in fact, we already just enrolled our 20 people. We're currently right now in this interim analysis period. We're waiting for the 20th person to get 6 months of treatment. They're about, I think, 3 months in right now. And once they hit the 6-month mark, we're going to look at what's happened to these first 20 people and decide what to do moving forward. And so neratinib targets a different pathway. So brigatinib was an ALK inhibitor. This is the EGFR HER2 inhibitor, so different parts of pathways we think are affected by NF2 loss. But it similarly is already FDA approved for this time breast cancer, and we thought it might work here. So we already also knew a little bit about its safety and its dosing and like kind of what dose we should be using. This one does have some more side effects here. You can see in the GI, especially GI issues kind of area, so things that we're monitoring for, and it's also an oral medication, so also just a pill. So I think I have it at the bottom. It's a little bit covered by the caption. Stage 1 enrollment closed October? Does that say?
August 2024, it looks like.
August 2024, yeah. What did I say that's in October? Oh, it opened in October 2022. So it took us from October 2022, just to get a sense of the timeline, to August 2024 to enroll everyone. And now that person in August, we're gonna wait until they've got to 6 months, and then we're gonna do the interim analysis. So hopefully data to come. So we're not currently enrolling any new people right now because we're waiting. And then we should know though, it took us last time the 6 months and then 3 months of analysis. So what's 9 months after August? I would say by April or May, we'll have it open, or we will not. Although we're still looking for funding actually for to open it if we are going to open. But hopefully we will work that all out. So we'll know whether or not this was worth it and which kind of ones it's working for, and we'll release that data. If it looks like there was some responses and there's promising things we're going to enroll, we'll be enrolling 20 new people for that. But that's also not the end. We are also actively looking for new drugs that are promising. Nothing that I can disclose at this point, but talking to different pharmaceutical companies, seeing what's available. So we'll hopefully have a new arm open. I can't say when, I'm not sure exactly when, but hopefully we'll have more. So the whole idea is that this will be perpetually enrolling, and as soon as we have a new drug that looks like it's promising, that has enough safety evidence for us to feel confident moving it forward into humans, we can plug it in and there'll be a new arm open for another 20 people. So this is the end, I think, for this section, if people have questions on into it, but hopefully this is shown we are making progress. We're making progress in the way we design our trials to make it faster and to get more information per person. We were able to show that brigatinib has some activity, especially for meningiomas and non-vestibular schwannomas, which up till now didn't have great treatment drug options. We're exploring the use of doing brigatinib and bevacizumab together, maybe making that an arm to see combined, can we have even better results? And we are awaiting this neratinib information, so more to come soon. And tons of acknowledgements. There's like a bazillion people. I hope I didn't miss too many of them. Both at Mass General, we're the coordinating site, and on all of the other sites across the country, the different pharmaceutical companies and funding agencies. And then Synodos is actually the preclinical consortium that identified brigatinib as potentially an interesting compound. So really showing that connection from the preclinical to the clinic work. Any questions about that one before we move on to psychosocial trials? Okay, what time is it also? Does anyone know when is it? We're going to 3:15?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Oh, we're right on schedule then, I think. Okay. Well, actually, no, that's not true. We're not on schedule, but that's fine because we can skip the traumatist stuff at the end. The other main set of trials I thought would be interesting to talk about, because I think we hear trials, we think drugs, but there's a whole lot of things that aren't drugs that are helpful for working with people with NF. And this is a program run originally by Dr. Anna Maria Ranciano, a psychologist I work with at Mass General, and continued by Ethan Lester, another psychologist at Mass General, to try and do what's called the Relaxation Response and Resiliency Program, a mind-body program for people with NF. And I thought for this session I could especially highlight the adaptations that were made for people with NF2 who have hearing loss, and ways that we've been trying to make therapy more accessible to folks. So the way that this developed, and so this actually, the Relaxation Resiliency Response, that's the 3 R's program, that's the P. How it was developed is actually, so back in, and also to think of a timeline here, 2013, it was developed at the Benson Henry Mind Body Institute here at MGH as a way to try to help people who are coping with some sort of illness. And so it was not NF specific originally. And it has 3 main components. It's about how can we elicit the relaxation response, so like kind of force your nervous system to calm down through relaxation and mindfulness techniques. How can we help people with appraising, kind of figuring out when they're under stress and having effective coping techniques when that's happening, and growth enhancement, so using kind of techniques from positive psychology to help people kind of teach them acceptance about what they can't change, problem solving for what they can, to help kind of adapt and recalibrate as they get new symptoms. So this was developed not at all for NF, just for everyday people, kind of a range of chronic conditions, and it was tailored for use in NF by my colleague Dr. Graziano to have specific NF-related symptoms and issues that we brought into the manual for how to teach this. And I guess I should have said, what even is it? So the program itself is a group-based program with a psychologist who delivers the therapy. People would meet, say, a group of 8 to 10 people. Originally, this was in person, so at the hospital. They'd come once a week. The therapist would lead them through these exercises. There would be homework. There was a little manual that you could have that you could reference, CDs where you could listen to some of these relaxation exercises and practice at home. And it was a kind of an 8-week course to try to help people cope with some of their stress and anxiety. And then this was tailored over time, like I said, first to be NF specific. So the manual had specific NF examples. We enrolled people specifically with NF, and I mean all types of NF, so I should now call it, we used to say NF for all types, now I feel like we say NF and schwannomatosis. So I actually mean everything, NF1, NF2, other types of schwannomatosis. We're all enrolled and would go do these groups together in person. First thing we learned, getting into Boston was a terrible time for most people. In person sucked. So we moved it to virtual. That was the first adaptation, well, second adaptation, first for NF. Then we said, okay, let's make it virtual groups. And there's actually a whole line of testing in these mixed groups. So groups that had NF1, NF2, and schwannomatosis, doing this over what's essentially Zoom or Skype sessions, which they were able to show was effective. But then we said, wait, we need to make some tweaks for certain kinds of people. And one of the things that came up specifically for folks with NF2 and hearing loss was, it's kind of hard to hear everybody in this group on a Zoom call. And Susie said, that makes perfect sense. Let's try doing it with CART. So the live captioning, same as here, to facilitate the Zoom calls. And the reason they actually did that, they asked, this is the pros of qualitative research, they did a focus group with people with NF2 and said, we have this program, we want to make it more accessible for people with hearing loss and more effective. What should we change? And so that's what I have here under the rationale. They said, we don't want it to be text-based, we still want to see people's faces, so can you do CART captioning? Because we can't hear, we can't listen to those CDs that are practicing the exercises, and right now they're so long, it's really hard to memorize. So can you make simpler exercises that are easier for us to then memorize, because we aren't going to have that audio cue, because some of these are, if you've ever heard the meditation ones, they're like saying the meditation words in your head. That obviously didn't work. So it was really listening to patients, what should we tweak? And then they also said, we have specific hearing loss related stressors that we want to address, that we want to talk about, and different strategies to aid communication. Can you put that also in the material? It would make it more helpful for us to, for example, teach people who don't know about adaptive technology, what kinds of technology was out there. So they added all these modifications in. and then wanted to test, does this work now that we've kind of tweaked the formula? Can we have people who are either deaf or have significant hearing loss participate in this program, knowing that it worked in our other studies? So they had 45 people that they enrolled in this randomized clinical trial, and so after the program, based on these patient-reported outcomes, right, these surveys people filled out, they saw that people's quality of life got better, and they also said that they did feel like they had better resiliency skills, so better social support. They said they were having an easier time coping with their symptoms and higher levels of gratitude about kind of what they were able for. And these were better than what was seen in a control group. So these are people who all got the intervention, but there was a comparison group of people who did still meet in a group session, but just got regular education about stress. And so we saw that the improvements were bigger than that. They were large enough to be kind of meaningful and sustained at 6 months follow-up. So, something that still persisted over time. This was published in 2019. But even with that adaptation, that doesn't still make it accessible for everybody. And so I thought this was an interesting example of the ways we can continuously tweak our programs. So that was 2019. But then we also thought, what about people, this is still pretty time intensive. You need a therapist to actually be there, and you need to be meeting there. Everyone in the group of 6 or 7 people has to pick a time that they're kind of meet every week. And so we found that roughly a third, I'm saying the royal we, I was involved in like the very first study and nothing after this, so I should say they and not take credit. I was not involved in this part. They found that about a third of the people who reached out to participate in earlier versions of the program, they were interested and they were eligible, but they actually couldn't sign up at the end, either because of the scheduling problems, the time commitment to be doing this for an hour and a half every week for 8 weeks. Interestingly, they found there were some people who just really didn't want to be on a video call. They felt uncomfortable being on a video call with another group of people, particularly some people with facial tumors or facial palsies, just that I don't really want to do this in front of people, or people who had kind of social anxiety, and they said, the group thing is not for me. And so to make this even more accessible to people, they said, what if we did an online version, an asynchronous one, so not one where you have to meet at the same time as people. You can each do it when you fit, and you do it on your own time. And this was developed with support. I wanted to shout out NF Midwest and some of the other organizations who really helped with translating this. And I have the website here at the bottom. It's nf/web.org. The actual study itself is finished, but the resources are still freely available online. So if you want to check out all the video modules that they recorded to teach people these skills are up for free online. You can access them whenever you want. So I just took some screenshots from the website to show this was the kind of online program adapting this. That was meant to be, so the difference here is that it's self-guided. They recorded all of the sessions, so there is the psychologist who walks you through the exercises, but you can play them in little 5 to 10 minute video modules. In the version of this trial, they did actually enroll people as a cohort, and were following them and had little quizzes to check their knowledge. So that part is not still functioning at this part now that the trial's over in terms of the interactive discussion with the study team. But they said, we already made this website, we already have these videos, like it should just be available. So that's why I want to highlight, if you guys want to check it out, you can. And so in their pilot test, they found that it seemed like people like to use this. About 80% of people could enroll, which is better than before, where more people were dropping out because they said they didn't want to do the group stuff. And people mostly did it, so not everybody watches everything, which is fine. 58% though of the video modules people watched. They did about 70% of the homework. They said they were satisfied with it. And they did see this had no control group. This was just an early pilot test of how people liked the website, but they saw that people had better quality of life, lower symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress, and better resiliency skills. So this was just published in 2022 and 2023. So TBD on the expansion and rollout of that, but I thought it'd be interesting to share as this example of how even when we have a new therapy and even a successful trial, which the first one was, by all accounts, it had these improvements, they lasted for time, there's always room for improvement and tweaking. So even when you see a study that seems like, oh, didn't we already kind of study this? Like the tweaks actually kind of matter, and I think it's interesting to see how over this now 20-year time, from the 2013 when they made this for not NF, for other kinds of chronic illness, to then iterate it through in-person, virtual, for NF, with card captioning. What about an asynchronous option that we can always tweak it and make it better to try and really make it more accessible to more people and get this out in front of more people, including people who don't go to an NF clinic and maybe don't have access to the kind of support that they otherwise would need. Any questions there? That was my last slide about that trial, or kind of trial. By any chance, did anyone participate in any of those? I'm not sure. They also did an adaptation for adolescents.
I think my son did.
They also did this for
adolescent
12 to
one.
17-year-olds.
Yeah, I think he participated in that one, but he's a teenage boy, so I don't think he did that.
Yeah.
He was like, I did it for that part, and then I'm like, I've ever used it, you know, like, so.
I have to say, I have learned meditation from the same group, and it's like life-changing stress levels.